Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. I'm here tonight with a good friend of mine, Steve Wraith, who actor, promoter, Mr. Newcastle, all sorts of plates juggling. Who's got a new book, which is, I believe, out on Amazon Kindle now. Every Boy's Dream. And we're going to talk a little bit about that now. I'm going to ask a load of questions. We've done these kind of things. We've done these kind of things a few times, haven't we? But I don't think we've ever kind of gone down this route. I don't think we've ever kind of tackled this kind of subject before. So I think it'd be quite interesting. My first question is: this is an autobiographical book. It's your second one that you've done. How is it different from the first one, and how did it come about?
I mean, it is different because it covers Newcastle United in my life, which has never been done before. The first biographical book, what you want to call it, was the Craze the Geordie Connection, which I co-wrote with Stu Wheatman, and that focuses on that 10-year period of working for the Cray twins. So this one was a book I always wanted to do, but was never sure when to do it. I didn't know if I was going to do it myself. I didn't know if somebody else was going to do it for me. And I had a couple of approaches in the past by other authors who said, I would love to write your book, and we can touch on the football, we can touch on the criminals, we can touch on the boxing, we can touch on the door work and the celebrities, and, cover all of that kind of stuff. And I've got to be perfectly honest that the two previous attempts just weren't really doing it for me. The first person who attempted to do it, style of writing the person was using didn't really suit me. I just thought, it's never going to work, so I put a stop to it. The second author who tried it was essentially working on a separate project, which didn't quite work out, and that led me to stop that particular version. And ultimately, the third version, which is the book which is being released, Every Boy's Dream, with Jamie Boyle, was good for me ultimately because I knew that Jamie had the experience of writing these kind of books with his Lee Duffy book and his Brian Cockrell book, etc. He'd done one with Terry Dicko, he'd done one with Paddy Maloney. So he was starting to specialise in those books. And I thought the other thing with Jamie is that he's going to allow me to have some major input. And, I was really keen because I'd already written a few things down and over the years I'd put together a few chapters, and really just so I didn't forget dates and times. And, I was able to give them to Jamie, and that was a good starting point for the book. So it's different because it covers my life as a whole from being born in South Shields in 1972 to current day. So it brings us right up to date. And I think there's something in there for everybody. I think, those people who are, wanting the Newcastle United stories they're there. But I think, anybody who's wanting a little bit of the criminal stuff, there's a bit of that in, my involvements with various people. And, ultimately, there's a bit in about the acting, because obviously that's been my passion for the last few years. So boxing fans won't be disappointed either, because there's a bit in there from the boxing career. So I think we've managed to get everything in without boring the people who maybe are football fans with crime, boring the people who are interested in crime with football. I think we've managed to get everything in, and there's a few personal stories which I've never shared with anybody before either. I've obviously my close family know about various things, but there's a few stories which might surprise people about experiences that I've been through in my life.
I mean, I guess that leads me on to the next question, which is, I mean, you're an author yourself. You write books yourself through your own company. How did that process work with somebody else writing a book about you? How did that work with Jamie? I mean, we both know Jamie. How did that work?
I had to really let Jamie get on with it. Is the best way of describing the process, because I am a bit of a control freak in projects that I do, but that's because I've got high standards and because I like to get things, like to get things done and achieve things, and sometimes, I feel that, if I leave it to other people, that it's not going to, it's not going to be done properly. And I know that sounds a bit arrogant, but, when you have high standards, it has to be done like that. And the old saying, if you want a job doing properly, then do it yourself, is something which I've always lived and died by. And, at least if I've given it my own, given it a go myself and it's not good enough, then I've only got myself to blame. I don't have to then get into the blame game with people. But yeah, with Jamie, as I said, he has experience in writing these kind of books. I knew some of the people who he'd written the books with, who said it was a fairly easy process. And he used a similar technique that I'd used with Paul Ferris when I did Unfinished Business, which was a selection of meetings over a certain period of time. Me, the subject matter and a dictaphone, and trying not to stretch it out too long. I know Jamie was keen on doing 3-4 hour sessions. I always feel that working on a 2-hour session is probably best, because you start to become tired, or your mind starts drifting after 3 or 4 hours. But we met halfway. We did 3-hour sessions, and it worked out well. I mean, Jamie asked the right questions. He didn't go off on a tangent. He was trying to stick to the list which he had. But we worked well as a team, because essentially I had my list, he had his list, and he made it quite clear from the start, that I wouldn't be hassling him if I was sending him a WhatsApp message or a text message about certain things. If something came to mind, he wanted us to send him it, and that was it. That's how easy the process was in the grand scheme of things. But I think the fact that I was also able to send him those notes, and I think I sent him something like 20 Word documents of stuff which I'd written down over the years, with certainly the Newcastle United stuff, because it's easy to forget a game or a date or a particular incident that's happened, and to write those dates down or timings down or whatever was very important, because the book will be judged ultimately by a lot of Newcastle fans who will go, well, we didn't play in the FA Cup on that date, or we didn't do this, or we didn't do that, so or Shearer didn't score that game. You know what I mean? If there's a little mention to a game or something, you have to be right. And those were the kind of things with which Jamie, as a Celtic fan and a guy who lives in Middlesbrough, probably would have struggled with, knowing off the top of his head. And sometimes the internet isn't as reliable as we'd like it to be. So from my perspective, to get those things, written down and done properly was beneficial. And I think it certainly benefits the book. And, Jamie was very happy with it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take it right back to the start. The one thing a lot of people don't know about you is that you, as a Newcastle supporter, went to a private school in Sunderland.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I was 2 years behind everybody else. I went to the Drive Primary School. This was before Ofsted really checked on schools, etc. And I was 2 years behind everybody. I couldn't really read or write. 2 years into junior school. My parents put us into private education to try and get us back on track. They put us into St Anne's in South Shields, which was originally an all-girls school, which had just started to admit boys. So I ended up in there for 2 years. I was the only boy in a class of 13, which was strange. And entrepreneurial skills really came out there. That's where I first did my first bit of business. I used to show the girls mine if they showed us theirs for 10 pence. Charging 10 pence for the privilege. It's not one of those things that you would think of doing, but obviously I did. And look, my dad was set in his ways, very old school, and he felt that if I spent my life in a school which was predominantly full of girls, there was potential there for me to maybe behave like a girl, or to have gay tendencies. He thought I was going to become a homosexual by staying at an all-girls school which had just admitted boys, and that was the way of the world in those days. And my dad just thought that was the case, so he thought moving me to an all-boys school in Sunderland would benefit us, and man us up a little bit. And he started taking us to play rugby, which I hated. And had us walking around the golf courses at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and stuck us in an all boys school. So it's no wonder I rebelled. But Argyle House in Sunderland was my home for the next 5 years. Well, 6 years. Last year in junior school, and all of my senior education. So amazing to go down there. I mean, I always wore my Newcastle top. It's sports activities. I was the only Newcastle fan in my class, and one of two in the entire school. But it has to be said, not many Sunderland fans went to the school. Probably two of the teachers that I can remember, and maybe about 6 or 7 of the lads in the entire school supported Sunderland. The rest of them supported Liverpool at the time, who of course were, winning leagues, winning FA Cups, and of course winning European Cups. So strange times, character building to say the least. And Argyle House was certainly a school which which I will always remember fondly for the wrong reasons. You know, it was very like Tom Brown school days, the cane and that kind of thing. But that's some great memories, and you know, I still keep in touch with a couple of the lads who I went to school with, and a couple of the teachers who you know, turned out to be good eggs, really.
I think Argyle House was where you caught the bug for acting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, my parents were also keen on me being able to speak the Queen's English, and you know, my mum and dad put us in for elocution lessons. They felt that if I wasn't going to be somebody who could, you know, be a top mathematician or you know, pass a lot of exams, that at least if I could speak properly, that somebody who can speak properly can certainly open a few more doors for themselves. So my mum put us in for the elocution lessons. I got put in for poetry competitions at school, many of which I won, and I enjoyed them. I enjoyed the adulation, I suppose. I enjoyed being centre of attention. I could learn the lines, I could perform, and of course, anyone getting a pat on the back for anything, you're going to enjoy it. So, you know, I you know, that was my first taste of that. So my parents, recognizing that I had that talent, then started looking for another way that I could express it. So they got me into the People's Theatre in Newcastle, a drama club on a Saturday morning. It was called the Young People's Theatre, and you know, there was people like Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys going to that, and you know, Tom Goodman Hill, as he is now, who's, you know, been in some fantastic films and is virtually in every period drama that you see on ITV these days. So there was you know, a few people who went there, who went on to do really well, but that was the first steps on the ladder for acting.
And that led you then to kind of tour. You toured the world, didn't you? You toured America, and tell us how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky because the Young People's Theatre obviously worked, you know, on a voluntary basis. We didn't have to pay to go, but they were linked to the Adult People's Theatre as well. And, you know, it's a fantastic building. It's had a renovation recently. I haven't got along since it's been renovated, but looks fantastic from the outside. And yeah, I was lucky that we went on trips. You know, they would organise trips. And I ended up, you know, in a position where I went to America when I was 13. We did a 3-week tour of America. We took Undermilk Wood there. I was part of the chorus, so I didn't have a lead part. But that was great because it meant that there was less work to do and more time to have adventures. But we went to New Jersey, we went to Philadelphia, and went to New York. I had my first romance in Herkimer County, which you know, I remember crying endlessly as I left me first ever real love in Herkimer. But yeah, he was fantastic, and to go to New York, etc., just an unbelievable experience. And 3 weeks out there was you know, surreal. But to do 3 weeks away from home as a 13-year-old without your parents was even more bizarre. And then fast forward three years later, I was cast as the Artful Dodger in Oliver, and I was given the opportunity to go to Russia. And Russia was just coming out of its, you know, the Iron Curtain had fallen. It was just starting to wisen up a little bit and become more westernized. So they were building the first McDonald's there, and I had 2 fantastic weeks, you know, with my friends. We didn't do many performances, but we did a couple, which went down well. But just to go to Russia was just an amazing experience, to stand outside the Kremlin. And the 2 downsides of the whole trips, actually, and I'm not sure whether I cover them in the book, is that the Statue of Liberty was covered in scaffolding when I went to New York, so I didn't see the Statue of Liberty on that occasion. And when I went to Russia, we went to Lenin's tomb, and that was closed for cleaning. So the 2 major places that I wanted to go to were both closed. So yeah, look, fantastic opportunities as a young man, but and as a young actor to go to different countries, you know.
I'm gonna ask you about English as well, and at Argyle House, because this is probably the only question I've got that refers to any of this. But I think your love of English started really with an English teacher who allowed you to study Profession of Violence by John Pearson, and that led you. I mean, it'd be wrong to do an interview with you and not cover this. Led you then to an association with the craze. How did that come about? And the second part of that question, what was it like to visit Ronnie Cray?
Right, okay. Answering Vision Dom's question first. What is the generalized theme for the book, Steve? It covers the whole aspect of my life. It's like it's an autobiography, biography, whatever you want to call it. It's covers Newcastle United, of course, my involvement with the football club, covers my involvement with various criminals, different people who I've done business with, books for, etc. Obviously covers the boxing side of things and the acting. Yeah, English, Neil. It was Peter Yates came in as my English teacher in third year seniors. He replaced the previous English teacher who just thought I was a waste of space. I seem to have personality clashes with teachers. The headmaster didn't like us. The maths teacher didn't like us. You know, it just wasn't working out for me. I was more the class idiot at school. And the English teacher changed in the third year. And Peter Yates, he just saw something in me. And I was doing the first year of GCSEs, which meant that coursework was predominantly 50% of your work, as well as 50% exam based for your final result. And he just gave me the opportunity to add an extra book to the curriculum. So I was studying A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, The Crucible by Arthur Miller, and then I was allowed to choose 2 other books of my own choice. So I chose Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham, and I'd picked up a copy of Profession of Violence by John Pearson when I was shopping on the quayside with my parents one Sunday morning. It was 30 pence, this orange book with black photograph with the craze staring out at us, you know, these 2 guys. And I read that book after within 2 days, and by the end of the week I'd read it again. And the English teacher saw that. He thought, look, there's a potential here for this pupil to do well if he's allowed to study this book. And that's what he allowed me to do. And you know, God bless him for that, because I ended up in this position where I passed, you know, my English exam, passed English literature and English language, got a B and a C, and it was all because of, you know, studying that book. Going from, that exam pass, I decided to write to the Crays. I wrote to Reggie Cray and Ronnie Cray at the same time, explained to them that I passed the English exam studying their book, and it basically became a pen pal relationship. You know, from there, I had a reply from Reg and Ron to say they couldn't keep up with correspondence. But then a few months later, I saw a young lad called Brad Lane, who was corresponding with the twins, Reggie in particular. Reggie'd adopted him, in inverted commas, and I wrote to him, and we kept up a correspondence. And it was just a fast tracked experience. I went down to visit Brad and his mother Kim in Doncaster, and that particular day, Reg rang me at their house, and we spoke, and he told me that I should go and visit him. So I went down to see Reg in Gartree. That was fascinating in itself, because Reg was he was an institutionalized prisoner, and to go and meet somebody in prison, I'd never done that before. So to go and meet Reg was fascinating. But after the visit, he told me that I should go and see Ron. And your question was, what was it like to see Ron? Well, it was amazing. It was at Broadmoor Hospital. It was a big old Victorian building. I walked through the ward, basically. So you didn't walk through a separate part of Broadmoor. You walked through the actual ward where the patients were kept behind closed doors, and then you would go into this big room which had a stage at one end with big red velvet curtains, and a stage where the patients would do performances, and you would be sitting on on chairs round a table waiting for the patients to come in. There was a cafeteria on the right hand side where you would go and get your soft drinks and your food. And then at the far end of the room was a big conservatory which led out into the big gardens at Broadmoor. So, if it was a sunny day, you could apply to go and sit out there. But yeah, on the day, the door opened, and through the door came this very small, smartly dressed man, blue pinstripe suit, hair slicked back, gold-rimmed glasses, white shirt on with RK embroidered into his shirt, pair of Gucci shoes and a pinky ring. And just looking every inch the gangster, and he came straight over and introduced himself, and shook his hand, shook my hand, and said, "You must be Steve from Newcastle." And that was it. We sat down. He clicked his fingers. The nurse came over and lit his first cigarette of what turned out to be 40 on the visit, and which he chain smoked John Player specials. And then he said, "Would you like anything to eat, Steve?" And that was it. We ordered some food. We ordered some drink. He had Caliber non-alcoholic lager. I think I had a Coke and a burger. And he reached over, put his hand on my knee, and just goes, Steve, I just want to ask, you don't mind that I'm bisexual, do you? And I went, well, I said, actually, Ron, I said, I'm not that way inclined, but each to their own. And he just laughed and went, good. And that was it. He broke the ice. You know, he was openly gay, Ron, and he just wanted to let me know that, I suppose. But you know, it was a fantastic experience. I look back on it and wish I'd been older, and I wish I could remember more of it. But it's still quite a vivid memory. I think the big regret I've got is that you know, I didn't get a chance to ask a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's so many questions that I would ask now, which I never even thought about asking them, because it wasn't a contrived visit. It wasn't premeditated. It was something I did on the spur of the moment. You know.
Right. Well, I think we can safely say we've crossed the craze off the list. Back to the one of the main themes of the book. Newcastle United, St James's Park. I've been plenty of times, sometimes with you. What's it like? Tell people who've never been. What's it like? What was your first game like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like?
Yeah, I mean, St James's Park to me it's a bastion of invincibility, as Bill Shankly used to say about Liverpool. It's an amazing place, and I mean, the first St James's Park that I went to in 1984 is a completely different place to St James's Park now, and yeah, it's just exciting. It's an exciting place. It's a place where I've had so many great times with, you know, me dad and me brother, you know, who are also season ticket holders at the football club, and it has so many happy memories. It has a lot of unhappy memories, but ultimately it's my club. It's a club that I love. It's a club that I've supported, you know, with all my heart properly since '84. But you know, I've always had an interest. The first game I went to was in '84. But yeah, it just means so much. But the original St James's Park was fantastic, with the old, you know, the old West Stand, and it was like a corrugated iron West Stand. And I mentioned it in the book, you know, walking up the stairs, I had to dress up. I'd been to other games with my granddad where I could wear my jeans and my trainers and, you know, have my hair scruffy. But when, you know, I went to St James's Park on this particular occasion with my granddad Green, I had to like wear a pair of smart trousers. My mum, you know, was combing my hair to look smart. I actually felt, you know, like a right dick, to be honest, going to this game. And, you know, I was thinking, God, this is the only downside, that I've got to dress like this to go there. But when I got there, and I understood why, because I was going in the director's box, and I was, you know, getting an opportunity to meet people who I didn't really know at the time: Jackie Milburn, Bobby Cowell, you know, all of these, you know, famous FA Cup winners, Joe Harvey, who was the last manager to win a trophy at Newcastle, the Fairs Cup. And you know, I was in the director's box with these people, having a cup of tea and a sandwich, and then getting taken out into the stand, and you know, sitting next to Peter Taylor, the famous commentator from Radio 5, you know, who was commentating on the game. And just an amazing situation to be able to go to, you know, to go to that kind of place was absolutely fantastic, and it just stuck with us. I'd been to other games at other grounds. I could have fell in love with Gateshead. I'd been to see them play in the Northern Premier League. I saw them win the title. Saw Terry Hibbert playing, and but you know, Newcastle was for me. It was in my blood, and that was it. You know, I say at the start of the book that, you know, I was born to be a Newcastle fan, and I genuinely believe that. You know, I was definitely born to be a fan. But yeah, it's a great place. It's a cathedral of football, and you walk in, and now the development that's happened at that ground, it's a 52,000 all-seater. It's a wonderful place to go to, and you know, you can tell when we've dropped into the Championship over recent seasons, it's the one game that fans want to come to. They want to be there. They want to see it. They want to be part of it. They're disappointed when the atmosphere is poor, and it has been for many years because of the apathy due to Mike Ashley. But you know, there's nothing better than St James's Park in full effect, and we've seen it this season when, you know, we've grabbed a couple of last-minute winners against Crystal Palace, and it was Almiron who scored, or you know, this, you know, Matty Longstaff scored. The roof goes off. It's against Man United. It was fantastic. But yeah, fantastic place, and you know, everyone says that about a football club, I know, but Newcastle is special.
And you went from fan to fanzine editor.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because that took several different guises, didn't it? There were 2 or 3 different names, and it got you your first kind of television gig, didn't it? Really.
we've never intended to get into that kind of thing. You know, the writing that came from obviously passing the English exam, and you know, to do a fanzine was never in my mindset. But I'd written to the mag fanzine, which is still, I think it's just an online presence these days. I don't think it's a hard copy, but I wrote to Mark Jensen, the editor. I wanted something published in there, and I was told that my article was too controversial. And I thought, well, if that's the kind of, you know, reaction you're getting, then why don't you just do it yourself? So that was it. I spoke to my mate in Scunthorpe, Steve, who came up for each game. I used to go to the games with him. Spoke to my dad, spoke to my brother, said, look, I'd like to do a fanzine. He's up for it. And the idea had come really from bumming into a load of lads from Bournemouth, of all places. We'd played Bournemouth at St James's Park, and I'd actually got a copy of their fanzine, and I thought, I'd love to replicate that, but do it about Newcastle. And I got a little bit of advice off them, and then, you know, that was it. My brother and me started cutting out photos from the Chronicle newspaper. We got a typewriter. We started typing things up on the typewriter. My mate said he would photocopy it and staple it together, and that was it. The fanzine was born. So Mickey Quinn at the time was wearing the famous number 9 shirt, and we essentially called it the Mighty Quinn. Thought it was a great idea, great title, and so did the public. They loved it. You know, Mickey Quinn was in good favour with the fans, and we did a couple of 100 issues of the first edition, and it sold out 40 pence a copy outside the ground. And that's what you used to do with fanzines: stand outside the ground before the home game and sell it. And it went on as the Mighty Quinn for 6-7 issues, and then of course the inevitable happened. Mickey Quinn left. Kevin Keegan came in as manager, and obviously replaced Mickey Quinn. We had Gavin Peacock and David Kelly, of course, playing up front in those days. But we put it out to the readers, you know, what would you like to change to? And the number 9 won hands down. So the Mighty Quinn became the number 9. And it was great experience. We managed to interview players. We concentrated more on humour. I didn't tell people that their articles were too controversial. So the more controversial, the better. Of course, a good fanzine relies on the team doing not so good. So it tended to work at Newcastle quite a bit. But yeah, we had 30, I think it was 36, 37 issues off the top of my head. And I think we finished it when we got to Wembley in the FA Cup final. The 1999 Cup final was where we ended it. And it was more down to personal reasons, because ultimately, you know, my brother was working full-time. I was doing full-time work. My dad was busy. Steve from Scunthorpe, Steve Cross, had packed in, getting involved. He wasn't doing it anymore. And we also find it difficult to get sellers. So, you know, the likes of Rob Blaylock was outstanding. He sold it virtually every issue for us. There's a few other guys as well who used to sell it on a regular basis. But we just found it difficult to get sellers. And although we had newspaper shop contracts by this time, people like Gillespie's and Smiths were taking it in, and we were getting it into the newsagents. They were taking a ridiculous percentage back off, usually 50%. And we ended up not making money, but probably breaking even on the majority that were sold in the newsagents. So it just became very difficult. Just became very difficult to do it. But it was something that I would revisit later on with 2 other magazines.
You touched very briefly on you said you had a full-time job and work. I know you tried to pursue the acting from a young age. It didn't quite work out at the time. And so then you went and ran a post office. How did that work?
Yeah, that's run a post office, not rob a post office.
Well, I'll talk about the robbery in a minute, but
John Ball, it'll be out first weekend July, mate. Yeah, I mean, look, the post office was really just the only option I had. I left school with very few qualifications. The 2 English at GCSEs and geography, and I still don't know how I passed geography. It can only because I wrote my name at the top of the paper and I could find my way to school, because I still genuinely don't know how on earth I passed that. But I ended up going into Gated College to do a BTEC, Newcastle College to do a BTEC diploma in performing arts. First year was going really well, and then I ended up doing a pantomime for a local company, and I was ripped off. And to be honest, that just, I thought, if that's acting, you can stick it. I was doing 3 pantomimes a day. I was playing the dame. I was putting the set up, doing the show, taking the set down, going on to the next social club, and then, you know, repeat the fade. 3 shows a day. It was absolutely crazy. Didn't enjoy it at all. And I thought, if that's acting, you can stick it. So the only option I had was to make money, was to go into the family business. So I remember being in the Wheatsheaf pub with my dad and my granddad and my grandma one night on a Sunday, and essentially just going, you know, I want to work in the post office. And they were going, you're joking. Well, I worked in the newsagents as it was. But, you know, it was the post office side. And I said, I want to learn the post office. So fair play to my dad and my granddad. They got chatting. They spoke to somebody who worked in the post office in Burnopfield, one of their friends. And they got me a month's trial to learn the post office, how to do all the counter transactions, how to balance the books, and, you know, do the balance at the end of each week. And that was it. You know, I came back from that month's trial and did really well. They recommended that I could manage a post office, and my dad made a big sacrifice for us. You know, he basically, you know, helped me engineer the purchase of the post office from my grandparents. They wanted to retire. My dad basically helped me buy the post office. He took the risk. He had a lot of trust in me to do it, but that was it. So we went in as business partners. My dad was 99% partner, and I was 1% partner. So I became the youngest post office manager in the UK. I was 17, and my dad said that if I worked well and worked hard and I worked on a reduced wage, that by the time I got to 21, he would reverse it. I would become 99% and he would become 1% partner. And he was as good as his word, and I was as good as my word. You know, I basically ended up running the post office when I was 21. So yeah, I did that from the age of 17 up until I was 27. I gave it 10 years. But, you know, it wasn't for me. You know, it was character building. I managed to write my first book, The Craze, The Geordie Connection. But
you ran a post office, weren't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was great for Reg because he was always after stamps, always on the phone for stamps. And, you know, he always knew where I was, you know, Monday to Friday. He knew I'd be working at the post office between 9 and 5:30. So he'd always be able to get a hold of us. And yeah, it was, he always found it amusing, and certain people did. And it gave me somewhere to sell the Craze merchandise, which didn't go down very well with the head office at the post office when they walked in one day and saw me selling Ronnie and Reggie Crate t-shirts on the wall on the shop side.
And from there, you did door work at kind of the same time, really. But from there, you then went to do kind of what a lot of people would think would be your dream job. You went to work for the club.
Yeah. I mean, working for the club was something I would never have dreamed of. And I mean, that's where the title of the book, Every Boy's Dream, comes from, because it, you know, for a Newcastle fan, it's every boy's dream to sign a contract for Newcastle and to pull on the black and white shirt and have a run around on St James's Park. And I've achieved that. You know, I have run around on the pitch as well, which I never ever thought I would do. But yeah, I mean, to do that was really it came from the fanzine stuff. I was obviously writing the fanzine, and when Sky came in and took over the televisation of football, then you found that they required a lot of fans to talk about the games. So they would do vox pops with supporters pre-match, after match. They would have shows like the Footballers Football Show where they would get you on TV and you'd be in the audience. And I was I was always invited to these things because I could always have a conversation. I could always ask a question, and because my knowledge was always quite good. So I ended up in a position where, you know, my phone would ring and ring and ring, you know, from local newspapers and television and radio outlets, you know, you know, for me to have me comment. And what tended to happen was that, you know, I would always be in an argument with the club. I would always have a disagreement with the club about something that, you know, they weren't happy about various things. You know, fans weren't happy about various things, and I would end up being asked about that. So we ended up in a position where Freddie Shepherd, who was chairman at the time, rang me up and said, look, you know, we're interested in getting you involved with this new fans forum idea. Would you come in and have a chat with us? And I went, yeah, that would be great. So I was introduced to David Stonehouse, who was the chief executive at the football club. And he basically said to me, look, he said, we've got a guy called Rogan Taylor wants to set up a thing called the Fans Liaison Committee. Would you meet him and have a chat with him? And then there might be something for you in this if we'll move forward, you know. So that was it. I met Rogan Taylor. He told us what the idea was. It was to set up a committee of fans who would meet with the club's fans liaison officer on a regular basis, but they had to try and sell that idea to the fans. So Rogan Taylor said, yeah, I'll do that. He pieced it all together. We went out and we did road shows together where we spoke to supporters and we talked about the different issues and the different problems. And then he came up with a way of having people nominate, put themselves forward for fans to vote for them. And that was how the Fans Liaison Officer and Committee was born. Because of all my help and because of the way that I'd done it, the club offered me the opportunity as Fans Liaison Officer. It suited Freddie and co at the time as well, because I was quite critical of them, often on television, often talking about them. And it suited them to get me on the payroll, because then I wouldn't be able to criticise the club. So that's what they did. And I got a lot of criticism from fellow supporters. There was a few fanzines really had a pop at me. Used the career angle a lot to have a pop at me and slag us off. And not a nice way to do things, but I understood their reasons. And yeah, look, for me, I was in a unique position though. I got to go to the club and sign a contract with the club. And there's many times I would sit and have me lunch, just with a packed lunch, sitting in the stand looking out onto the pitch. Unique opportunity and something which I didn't take for granted.
I mean, you've touched on it there, and you mentioned it. Well, you deal with it quite well in the book, I thought. Trolls. You get loads, and I mean, I've had experience of it today. How do you deal with it? How do you? I mean, you're put up on this pedestal as Mr. Newcastle, which you've never really wanted to be. But the media come to you when they want a talking head or whatever, and then you get slated for it. I mean, how do you deal with these keyboard warriors?
It's really difficult because keyboard warriors have no idea what's going on in your life, and I think the problem is it's on some occasions they can be giving you a hard time, and then ultimately you're suffering something in your personal life. So it is hard. I've always lived by the adage that you put your head above the parapet and you're there to be shot at. I'm a self-publicist. I always have been. I've always put myself out there in everything that I've done. A lot of the things that I do involve working with the general public. So writing books are for the general public, so they're there to be praised or criticised. Putting on events, whether it's with Floyd Mayweather or Alan Shearer, or events where I require people to come along and support those events for me to be able to pay the act, but also to pay myself and pay me bills. So I have to deal with the general public there. Writing for fanzines or loaded magazine like I have in the past, or whatever, means that you have to have your face and your name out there to promote what you're doing. So ultimately, everything that I've done, even the post office, was working with the general public, or doing the doors, was working on the front doors of various nightclubs and bars, up and down, the country and abroad. It was, you're putting yourself out there. So I'm used to it. But the recent, trend of trolling on social media is relatively new. But some of the stuff I've had to take has been nothing short of diabolical and obscene. I think the worst one was when somebody said that they hoped my wife was going to get raped. I've been called a nonce and a racist on more than one occasion on Twitter. I've seen people not actually tag me in stuff and call me a nonce and a racist. Neither of those things are true. I'm the most least racist person in the world, and I'm certainly, not a nonce, a sex offender. It's horrendous that people can get away and call you these kind of things. And I think, the Tory and the ball jabs I can get away with. I ran for the Tory party. I can't get away from it. I had to publicise myself for doing it. But as I cover in the book, I did it for a reason. I ran for the Tories to stop the BNP getting in my, who were knocking on my door on my street. So to be called a Tory, I find it childish. I just think, I've always said that my vote is between me and the ballot box, but I've had to open up more about it. I tend to vote Liberal in the general election and Labour in the local election, because there's no other party's going to get in your local election. But I actually know most of the Labour councillors in my ward, and they all do a bloody good job. So that's the way I tend to vote these days. So calling us a Tory is absolutely ludicrous. Bald, yep. I'm fully challenged. Nothing you can do about that. But it's been my choice since I was 18 to shave my head like this. So, I just think unfortunately, trolling is a horrendous thing. It's part of our society. I worry if we clamp down on it to a degree, or stop people having a chance to express themselves, because I'm a great believer in freedom of speech. But at the same time, I think we need some kind of anonymity lifted, because I think the way to do it is I have a couple of accounts. I've got my own account at Steve Wraith, but I've also got at Newcastle Legends. And I think it would be a simple way of doing it would be to have at Newcastle Legends, and then underneath it, account run by at Steve Wraith. And I think maybe a way of being forced to do that would make sense. You know what I mean? Just so that we know who is tweeting from what account, and everyone is held accountable for that. And I think you have to have a your proper name. I'm not saying you have to have a photograph. There could be some people who are actually uncomfortable with having an image for whatever reason, or whatever. So maybe it's not a photograph of the person, but certainly their real name, because I think the time has come for that kind of trolling to stop. Because as I said, I'm quite a strong character, but even I can have a wobble, and I certainly had one a few weeks ago when I had something going on in my personal life, but I was trolled about various things online, and it can become too much. And I'm pleased to say that with social media, however, that the outpouring of love and respect is far greater than the minority that troll you. But at the time, unfortunately, the one thing you do is you pick up on the negative, and that's it. But I could do that all the time. I just need to Google Steve Wraith and go onto the ready to go message board, which is the Sunderland message board, and they're constantly talking about us on there. But again, you live by the adage, if they're talking about you, you're doing something right, aren't you?
Yeah. I want to ask, you've got the most perfect bald head I've ever saw, along with Jason Statham, says Jamie. You've touched on doing the doors. I'm not going to go onto it really in any great detail, because there's other podcasts and things where you've talked about that in really good detail. But you left the doors and went to promoting full time. What was the reasons behind that?
Well, I just got sick and tired of confrontation on the doors, and it sounds daft. I mean, I did it for 18 years, but it was 10 years ago that I decided to walk away from the doors. It was Christmas 2010. And I just got to the 1st of December and just said, I've had enough of this. I had a really bad night. I'd started losing my temper a lot more, and I was always quite mild-mannered and calm and collected in any situation on the door. But we were starting to work to new rules. The smoking ban had come in, which meant that we had more people on the outside smoking in our faces, which wasn't great. Licensing hours had been extended, of course, to 24-hour licensing, which meant that no longer was I going home from a nightclub at 2 o'clock, but I was going home at 4, getting in at 5 sometimes. And I had a young one. My first daughter was born, and that came into consideration. But they were cutting the staff. The venue I was at, I mean, we had 2,000 people capacity, and they were asking us to cram an extra 300-400 people in for starters. But instead of increasing the staff, which you would have thought they would have done, they were reducing the staff. So we ended up on it used to be like something along the lines of 1 doorman per 100 people. So 2,200 people in a nightclub, there should be 22 doormen in there if you're doing your maths correctly. You're never going to have 22 doormen in, but you should have at least 12, maybe 15. By the time I came around to 2010, I had an issue where I had 8 doormen on a Saturday night for 2,200 people. And I was in a position where, with a smoking ban, I had to have me and my head doorman on the front door. It was me, the head doorman, my deputy head doorman. I had to have somebody on the inside door stamping for the smoking stamp. So there's 3 of us on the front door. That left 5 people inside on a 4-level club looking after 2,200 people. It's absolutely ludicrous. And no wonder that over the period of that, that 12 months, we ended up with more trouble inside than we'd ever had, which of course doesn't look good on the head doorman and his team. It looks as if we're at fault, we're letting the wrong type of people in. But there was also flaws in the system, because we ended up in a situation where the smoking ban inside meant that we had a situation where people were getting in through the fence at the back of the smoking area. So you could have somebody thrown out at the back door. We might not hear it because we're dealing with an incident on the front door. And then you would have somebody getting into the back of the smoking area, come back through, have a stamp on their hand because they're a smoker, and come back in through the front door. So suddenly the person who just kicked off with somebody on the top floor is now back in because we haven't heard the call about him getting chucked out the back. You can see I get agitated now just talking about it, and that became the issue. And it was just this student nights became a bit of a nightmare because they don't behave themselves. And because you had a big club, there was more of them and less doormen. There was more incidents. There was students taking their clothes off, were having to go in and grab people. There was, huge fights, between different ethnic minorities in the town on student nights that were getting in. And it just became an absolute ball ache. And I got there, as I say, the first of December, and I stood there and I was starting to do the rota for Christmas. I just thought, I cannot do this anymore. And I didn't have anything to go to. I was contemplating going back to do a degree in drama because I'd just started to do a GCSE in drama, which I was thoroughly enjoying. And I'd started doing events, and I thought, that's it. I'm gonna walk away. If I don't walk away now, I'll never walk away from doing the door. And I was surrounded by people who over the years had gone, I'm putting the door in next. Get this Christmas out of the way, and I'm packing it in. And I was surrounded by people who essentially were 10 years later were still doing the doors, and I thought that's just not going to be me. So I just made the decision. I thought I'm going to give in, and I give in before Christmas. That's the perfect time. So I told my manager, so I'm going to let you do this rota because I'm not going to be here. And he goes, what? I said, I'm not going to be here. And he tried to persuade us, and then he just said, look, have Christmas off. Come back in January, you'll have changed your mind. So that's what I did. I had Christmas off. It was the best Christmas I'd had for 18 years. And I just remember going back in on a cold, snowy January Friday night, walking in to have a meeting with me area manager and the manager of the club. And they were like expecting us to say that I was staying. And I just went, nah, I've enjoyed the time off, lads. And, I'm going to crack on. I'm going to make a success of my businesses. And that was it. So I had a little bit of time to think, and then I set up a company called Players Inc. Event Management with former Newcastle footballer Joe Allen and Andrew Brewster, who was a designer from Accent magazine. We set up a magazine, a Northeast football magazine first, and then we set an event management company up, and the rest was history. But never been back on the doors, since then, and never done any security work, and never looked back.
Okay, we've got 47 minutes in, and I don't think we've actually mentioned his name yet. If Mike Ashley was in front of you now, what would you say to him?
Well, I'd probably say what you're going to do next, because he is going to sell the football club. He is leaving Newcastle United. He's going to concentrate on his retail businesses. I'm in a lucky position because I met Mike Ashley. I met him twice. I met him once, like most fans did, on the terraces when he was mixing with the fans. I met him at Wigan away. Got a photograph with him. It's quite a funny photograph. He looked really uncomfortable, as if he knows who I am, which he didn't. But the second time I met him was at the Diamond in Ponteland. Newcastle United had just been promoted back to the Premier League, and basically he was there. He paid for all the drinks on the night. It was a bit of a bone of contention with me. Me and my pals who I was allowed to take. Kevin Nolan had invited us down. I went to the party, turned up, there was nobody there. So I bought a round of drinks. And as I bought the round of drinks, the lads all went cheers. It cost us 16 quid. And then 2 minutes later, Mike Ashley and the rest of the team walk in. Mike Ashley puts his card behind the counter, and nobody had to buy a round for the rest of the night. So I got stumped for a 16 quid round, which the lads thought was hilarious. But yeah, halfway through the night, I went up to Mike Ashley and I just said, look, from my perspective, nice to see you, Steve Wraith. I says, I've written a few things about you, and I says, I've probably been one of your biggest critics. I said, congratulations on getting promoted. What's your plans for next season? And he turned around and said, he shook my hand. He says, thanks very much, Steve. And, he says, well, I run it like a business. He says, I look at the books. I see what's made money and what's lost money. And if there's anything lost money, then I change it. He says, but to be honest, with a football club, I just leave that to Derek, meaning Derek Lambias. And that was it. And I was, just about to have a bit more chat with him. And then Derek Lambias, who was a bit of a nemesis for me, came up to us and went, oh, look, Steve, tonight's not the night for this, and asked us to move on. And I just found it a little bit, off that the chief executive would do that. But, I found Mike Ashley to be approachable. you know, I've criticised him and I've slated him, you know, with due cause and due right over some of the decisions he's made. But, you know, he's off now, and, you know, as soon as this takeover gets announced, the better. And, you know, it shouldn't be too much longer.
Phil Wilson says he's being based in Newcastle and being a proponent Newcastle upon Tyne as a place, being a help or a hindrance in trying to progress your media, publishing, acting career. That's a really good question. Just where you live and where you're based, and being a prominent kind of Newcastle fan, does that has that caused you any? Has that been a hindrance to you or a benefit? And I say that as an adopted Geordie who's an incredibly proud Northeasterner.
I think it's 50-50, Neil, to be honest, and Phil. I think it's been a pro and it's been a negative. As most people who know us closely, I am up and down to London quite a bit. I've got some great connections down there, which really came through me connections with the creators. But I think, you know, being in Newcastle, it's somewhere I'm immensely proud of the area. I love it, and I'm always trying to shine a light on it for the right reasons. I think the fact that, you know, I've managed to get myself some decent acting roles. I've managed to make my acting career a success so far, and I'm nowhere near winning an Oscar, but at the same time, I'm not at the bottom of the ladder, which I was when I first started out. My CV reads really well. You know, over 20 plus credits now. You know, if it ended tomorrow, I've been on a major BBC TV program twice. Done Vera on ITV, which is still one of the most watched detective series, and done, you know, so many great films, and, you know, become part of the franchise like Rise of the Foot Soldier. So, you know, for me, I've achieved everything I wanted to achieve as that young lad at Argyle House, as far as an actor is concerned. But I still want to achieve more. I want to go so much higher in the acting world. And, you know, if me luck's in and I continue to work in the right way, then hopefully that will happen. With the publishing, probably has, because I think a lot of people think, well, those Geordie stories are not interesting. It's been difficult. Like, it was difficult originally to get like the Sayers book and the NME book that we did. You know, we did pitch the NME book to Blake's Publishing, and they weren't keen on it. We did eventually get an offer off them, and then, you know, it ended up going by the wayside. We self-published, which proved to be the right thing to do. The Sayers book we kept for ourselves. We didn't want that to go to a main publisher, and that's proved to be the right thing to do. I was always disappointed that the Craze the Geordie connection didn't get you know, in with Blake's. I thought, you know, at the time, and it's one of the few books about, you know, about the Craze time behind bars. You know, it's very few books out there about that. So I'm pleased to say that Sean Atwood has took that on with his publishing company. So that's going to get its third rebrand and it's a new release. The Craze the Final Years will come out later this year, thanks to Sean. So, you know, I'm you know, trying to right the wrong with that one, I suppose, because I still think that's, you know, people still write to me and say, pick a copy of their book up in Australia or New Zealand or Thailand or whatever on me travels, and it seems to be one of those books that people pick up when they're traveling and then dump in one of these cafes, and people pick it up and take it, and, you know, so that book still does the rounds, and it was my first book, and I'm still immensely proud of it. So it's nice to be able to still hear that. But yeah, I don't think being based in Newcastle is as much of a downer as people think. I think my job in my generation is to turn people's minds around. You know, we're not cloth caps and whippets up here. You know, we're a progressive set of people. And the imminent takeover by, you know, Amanda Staveley, the Reuben brothers, and the PIF could see Newcastle, you know, being the place where everybody wants to come to do business very soon.
You talked about the Sayers book. I mean, the Sayers book was an absolute bestseller, and it, you know, it's gone on to have, I think, is it the third print run now?
Yep.
They get an entire chapter in the new book. What's the crack there, and what's the future hold for that project?
The Sayers have obviously been a big part of my life. You know, I've known the Sayers family. You know, I've known Stephen Sayers longer than anybody else. You know, nearly 25 years I've known Stephen, but the rest of the Sayers family known them best part of 20 years. And it was always a project to get the book done. They weren't interested in doing it, but then subsequently, you know, Conroy's appearance on McIntyre moved the goalposts. He was heavily critical of the Sayers family, and they had to have a right to reply. And we gave them that opportunity. You know, me, Rebecca Sayers, and Stu, you know, co-joined wrote the book. You know, I did a lot of the groundwork. Stu put it together after, you know, me and Rebecca had really put it together, and it became a bestseller. And there's no wonder. I'm obviously working on Operation Sears at the minute, which comes out at the end of October, which is a completely different book. You know, focuses quite strongly on a couple of big cases using depositions, which I've been reading through over the last couple of years. And now the film is coming out off the back of a documentary done by Media Arts, which is available on Amazon Prime. So, you know, we've now got everything that we need for that to be successful. And you know, we had a socially distanced meeting this week with Gary Fraser, the director, and the script is now coming on. The lockdowns massively helped the project because, you know, we're going backwards and forwards with different ideas. And, you know, the fact that the script is now being formed and developed, and we have a beginning and a middle and an end now is fantastic. It's all starting to fall into place. So, yeah, the Sears will and have played a big part in my life. And it's, again, you know, like Phil's question before about the area, I think it's not necessarily the area. I think sometimes my connections maybe worry people or concern people. The fact that I was involved with the Craze, the fact that I'm involved with the Sears family, you know, doing what I've done for them, it doesn't mean I'm a villain. Similar to, you know, meeting Tommy Robinson, like I have in the past, it doesn't mean that I'm racist. You know, it doesn't mean that I'm a murderer because I sat with Ronnie Cray. You know, you can't tar somebody with the brush. I might know these people. I might be able to have a civil conversation with these people. But it doesn't mean that that's me. It doesn't mean that, you know, what they do rubs off on me. And I always find that narrow-mindedness rather bizarre, you know.
Jamie, who wrote the book, has actually asked, is this book your chance about time to answer your critics, which I think, again, is another really good question.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because there's a lot of stories in here which I never thought I would ever put out there. You know, it's developed over the last few years, especially with different people asking to do the book. And then the stories in here that I wouldn't have done if Jamie hadn't done the book, if that makes sense. Jamie's written about villains and criminals. He's written about Lee Duffy. He's written about Brian Cockrell, you know, Warcry Publishing, who published the book, and obviously published those books. You know, they've got an experience in that market. And yeah, I am seen as being in that world, but everybody knows I'm not a hard man and I'm not a gangster. So I think for them, it's a bit of a break from the norm as well. It's a move away from that. But yeah, it's definitely a chance to answer the critics. You know, I've had a pop at a few people, I suppose, in a lot of ways, a right reply rather than a pop. You know, the football hooligan chapter, I suppose, is something people wouldn't have expected to see. But there's certain things that get on my nerves, which need to be addressed. Yeah, I think everything's out there in the open. The stuff there that everybody needs to see, you know. And I think from me, you know, it shows that I'm hoping that it changes a few people's minds. There's some people who will read the book who will never ever meet me, but who I hope, you know, maybe's changed their opinion on me slightly after reading the book when they read the reasons that I did certain things, like the funeral march at St James's Park, for instance. You know, exactly.
Reverend Wraith,
yeah, exactly.
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 6 topics which I haven't got time to ask you now.
Yeah, go for it. We're not tied to an hour. If you're not tied to an hour, I can continue.
I'm grand. I've got a few quick stories that are really interesting chapters in the book. First one, Roy Shaw.
Jamie's favourite chapter.
Yeah, now Jamie's obviously written another book about Roy Shaw. So I'm interested. I'm interested to know about this Roy Shaw character.
I mean, the story was covered in the Geordie Connection, but Jamie felt it was really important to put this in this book. I wasn't so sure, but you know, when I read the chapter, I thought, well, yeah, it does have a place in there, and it's really just, you know, it's a story about a woman, you know, and it's probably a story which most blokes can read. It's about thinking with your brain and not with your dick, I suppose. That's the best way to describe it, and that's how I described it to Jamie. You know, I just got besotted with a woman when, you know, I was young, free and single, and you know, she used me and abused me really, and chewed us up and spat us out, which is what she said she was going to do when I first met her, and I didn't pay attention. You know, she, in a nutshell, what she does is very, very clever and very manipulative. And she essentially put some photographs to one side when she'd had some serious resurgery on her face. An ex-boyfriend had beaten her up, And she showed me these photographs when we first started going out, and I found them quite horrific. She always wore a baseball cap, and that was the reason, because it was to cover the scars. So I never thought anything more of those photographs at all. You know what I mean? We got over that, but obviously the relationship hit rocky ground, which you can read about in the book. But then she started going out with Roy Shaw, and Roy Shaw then suddenly had a complete dislike for me. And Roy Shaw, of course, was like one of the hardest men in the UK. He was a bare knuckle fighter. Used to fight for the governor title against Lenny McLean. He was well connected with a lot of the faces in London. And suddenly had a complete dislike for me, which meant that I couldn't go to any of these events in London. And people were saying, "Oh, we can't invite you, Steve Wraith's going," and it just made it awkward because he was going out with this girl. And anyway, when we got to the bottom of it, it turns out that when she started going out with Roy, she'd showed him some photographs, and the photographs she'd showed Roy were, of course, the photographs which essentially she showed me, and she told Roy that I had done that to her, that I'd beaten her up. Horrendous situation to be in, but we did have a situation. We did have we were eventually invited to an event. Me and Roy had avoided each other thanks to many people, but we then I was invited to a boxing show down at Caesars in Streatham, and I had this awful situation where Roy actually went for us at an event, and I had no option but to defend myself, so I pushed him over. You know, I basically just pushed him back. He fell back, ended up on his backside, and inadvertently I've ended up, you know, having a, you know, deck Roy Shaw, not in the way that, you know, not a claim to fame, certainly not saying that we fought each other. I just defended myself. I got whisked out of the venue and taken away to somewhere safe, and you know, it just caused a hell of a stink in London. But luckily, Roy was all right. The person who caused a lot of this problems was found out to be the liar that they were, and you know, it was all shake hands, and me and Roy ended up becoming pals again. But it was not a nice situation to have Roy Shaw hanging over you at every opportunity, but not a situation that I backed down from, Neil.
Right, next quick story, QPR away.
Yeah, I thought I would treat Christian Simpson, my best pal. They were at a match in the capital, and Nicky Butt and Peter Ramage had said they were going to get us some tickets, which they kindly did, and it was in the director's box at Queen's Park Rangers. Unfortunately, at Queen's Park Rangers, the director's box isn't quite as good as Newcastle's, and it tends to be slap bang in the middle of the QPR fans. And we ended up in a position where Newcastle scored, Lovenkrands got the goal, and there was an old guy in front of me with his grandben, and basically they were verbally attacked by this guy in front. So there was more Newcastle fans in front of him, and I'm standing behind with Christian, and we're thinking, oh, we better say nothing. But anyway, you can't help it. The guy started pushing the guy. So I just says, yeah, mate, leave him alone. And he goes, oh, what are you going to do about it? It was like being a scene at Green Street. He turned round, and I suddenly become the focal point of his attention. He wants to have a go at me. Anyway, before, you know, you could see in Newcastle United, there was a sound of like wildebeest running behind me. Me and Christian turned round, and there's like 30 more QPR fans, all pals with this guy, all charging towards us. Christian went one way. I jumped over 3 rows, past the guy who's giving us grief, and landed in the middle of these 2 Newcastle fans in that cup of soup. The steward came down, basically carried us out the ground, and my head was bleeding. I bashed off the back of the seat. I would have been chinned. I would have been or arrested. Luckily doing that, obviously I got a little scar on the back of my head, but I got escorted out and into the Newcastle fans. My mates had seen us, and they were laughing their heads off, and of course they started singing, he's here, he's there, he's flying through the air, Stevie Wraith.
Very lucky you weren't cabbaged at the end of that.
Definitely.
Right, last one, and I was actually there on this occasion, so I kind of know the story, but tell the people watching. Steve Wraith.
Oh God, I forgot you were there as well. Yeah, we went to
cutlery.
We went to an event in London, and yeah, I'd had an issue. I'd had an issue with Newcastle about 6 months earlier. I'd been asked to go to a tribunal for a doorman who worked under me, basically. he was a head doorman for years. He got sent down to work at Chase Bar, where I was working at the time as head doorman, to work under me. And he was they sent him down there deliberately to upset him, because he didn't want to take orders from me, because I'd done the door 6 years less than him or something like that. And it became a major problem for him. He couldn't talk about it. He wasn't the friendliest of guys. And we ended up in a situation where I would have to tell him to move around. We had to rotate the doorman inside the venue. And on this particular night, I asked him to move around, and he just turned around and said, "Who the fuck are you?" And I went, "Well, I'm your head doorman." And so he pushed us. And as he pushed us on the front door, the manager walked out, saw what he did. "You're suspended. Go on, we don't need that, off the door." So he's effing and blind at me, and I'm going, "Well, I've never done anything." And that was it. He just, you know, the gaffer had got what he wanted. He'd upset the apple cart by sending this doorman down to me, and now the manager like suspended him, sent him home. So that was it. So he ended up on a tribunal through work. Not a major thing, just you got to explain your actions. And I ended up having to go as a witness, and I was told if I didn't go as a witness, that I would be, either stripped of my head doorman's job, or I could lose my job altogether. Doorman's contracts and stuff didn't exist. It was literally, you're employed by me, you'll do what I say. So what I did was I went to the tribunal, and I said, I'd rather submit my evidence, handwritten. So that's what I did. So I kept a copy of it, and I put the copy in. And basically, I just said, I will happily work with this guy moving forward, but this is what he did. I've got no issues with him, etc. This is what my beliefs are, and this is why I think he did it. I just left it at that. Anyway, they did what they wanted to do. They got shot of him. They sacked him, and he blamed me. So, of course, fast forward a few weeks, Stephen Sayers gets out of prison. There's a big get-together. Everyone's out on the drink. I was invited along, obviously, as a pal of his. And we ended up walking around Newcastle city centre. And I realised that we're going to be going to a bar where, I don't want to go to because this doorman's going to be working there. And the rest's history. I got asked to go. I said I wasn't going to. I was going to go home. And I ended up going to the venue, and the doorman came straight out and told us I couldn't get in. And that was it. I said, right, okay, I'll go home. And he goes, "You're not going home, Steve." He says, if he's got an issue with us, if he's got an issue with you, then he's got an issue with us. Obviously, the doorman didn't have an issue with anybody who I was with, so we all got in. That was it. That was the beginning of a big problem for me. And I didn't do that out of any spite. I didn't do it, deliberately. It was unfortunate that this was the choice of place they wanted to go to. And I had the most uncomfortable night in the venue. I didn't want to be there. I left, with everybody. So I was there till God knows what time in the morning. And that was it. Never give it any thought. And then the next morning I got a phone call. The phone call was from a withheld number. And it was, basically, that's Steve Wraith. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're not happy with you. You're mugging me off, mugging our club off. And, you shouldn't have come to the venue. And that was it. And then the person hung up. I asked them what their name was, and they wouldn't tell us. And that was it. So I made a few inquiries, didn't really get very far as to who this person was, but that was it. I just, I left it at that and never give it another thought. Then we went to London for a night out. I'd done a little piece for the programme to pay tribute to the two people whose event it was. And, we're at the venue, we're sitting at the table, just waiting for the videos to start to pay tribute to these two people. And I get a tap on the shoulder, and I hear, "Are you Steve Wraith?" And I'm like, straight away it registered. I'd heard that before, but it hadn't really, clocked on. It's 6 months later where I'd heard that before. And I went, "No, that's not me, mate." And he goes, "Well, it says you are in the programme." And I went, "Well, that's Steve Wraith. That's my name, not Steve Wraith." And that was it. I got a clip. The doorman came over and the people were thrown out. But I didn't know who the guy was. Couldn't register it, but it's going over in my mind. Steve Wraith. Is it something to do with a QBR incident? Was my first thought. Did I know who I am? There'd been stuff on the forums about me being involved. And it was just a strange situation. Anyway, the name came back to us from a couple of guys down there, Dave Courtney and Joe Pyle, who were, quick to the draw. picked up some cutlery and were coming over to me defence. But then they said who this guy was and what he did and which clubs he ran doors for. Suddenly I put, 2 and 2 together and got 4. This guy was obviously the gaffer of the doorman whose club I'd been into with the lads that night. Now I had a major issue. So that's what it all boiled down to. I never react stupidly in these situations. I made myself a cuppa when I got home. I subsequently had a couple of more phone calls. The next phone call was more serious. They said they were in Newcastle looking for us. I wasn't sure if they were. Then they put a doorman who was in town on the phone to us and said, you need to come and meet these people. I wasn't keen on meeting them because obviously I don't know who they are. I realised that they've got bad intentions because obviously when I'd seen them at the club, I knew I was in serious trouble. But through no fault of my own, I hadn't actually done anything wrong. But I needed to work out a way of explaining that to these people in a level-headed way without, getting myself into a predicament. So I rang one of the people who was out with us that night, and luckily they remembered the situation, and I explain it in the book. Obviously, they then make a phone call to somebody who is connected to these people, and that was it. I ended up in a position where I got a phone call from that person who had been, on the phone and who I'd seen at that event. And, once the truth was out, that they said they didn't have an issue with me, but it was an absolute nightmare situation to be involved in. I'm sure anybody would feel that. But yeah, we felt it warranted a place in the book because it's quite a nerve-jangling experience to go through. But it just shows you that, the kind of extremes people will go to get you into trouble if things don't go their way.
I mean, there's so many great stories in the book that I think unless somebody's been with you along the way, it'll surprise a lot of people. I think a lot of things that haven't been kind of talked about before, things you've not done interviews about. It's quite an eye opener, I think, for those who don't know you. We haven't really had a chance to touch on boxing. I know there've been a few comments about how much help you've been to people in the boxing world.
You're in the book, Mal. I mean, anybody wanting to hear about the unlicensed game? Me and Gary Furby have chatted about that on a previous interview, and you can find that on the YouTube channel today. But I've had some great times in the pro game. 8 years now in as a promoter, 8 years as a promoter, 5 years as a manager. It's been fantastic. Really enjoyed it. The boxing's been great, and we'll cover a lot of that. We'll cover a lot of the events. The Mayweather event, the Tyson event. Joe Frazier, you name it, they're all in there. Some great stories. Roberto Duran. There's something for everybody in the book. I think everybody who will enjoy, just reading about stuff like that will enjoy the book.
So, last word to you, Steve. Where can we get the book? When can we get the book? And a last-minute elevator pitch.
Yeah, the book essentially is out now on Kindle, so you can get it on Amazon, $4.95. But if you go on to Warcry Publishing website, you can get the details of the hard copy of the book, which comes out. And it's a big old book. I think 300 plus pages now. So it's a big old book. Comes out the first week in July. That's obviously just dependent on the printers, really, essentially. But from my perspective, yeah, look, I think if you want to change your perspective on Steve Wraith, you need to get it. If you want to read about Mike Ashley, Derek Lambias, Rafa Benitez, Amanda Staveley, all of those situations, the real story behind the Coffin March and those bloody gates that are up against the wall at St James's Park, then this book's for you. If you want to read about the boxing, both the unlicensed and the pro game, and how difficult it is to make a living in that sport, and get this book's for you. And if you want to read an updated version on my life with the different criminals who I've met, Eric Mason, Tony Lambriano, Paul Ferris, the Sayers family, again, there's plenty in the book for you on that score. So and really, I think I just want people to read the book and go, from my perspective, I want younger people to read it and go when they're at school. If they're not doing as well, that life's not so bad. There's always something that you can do on the other side. You know, I'm self-made. I continue to get new opportunities through my own endeavors. You know, school isn't everything. You need to stick in, do the best you can, like I did. But ultimately, you know, the most important school is the school of life. And, you know, from my perspective, you know, experience and being streetwise is just as important as getting those qualifications. So as long as you've got a bit of everything, you'll always be all right. But you get nothing sitting at home, you know, on your settee, smoking a joint and having a glass of wine. You know, you've got to get out there and do it. And nothing's impossible. You can be the best you can. And that's hopefully what people will get out of this book.
Excellent. As usual, we've overrun. I'll just wind you up and off you go. But that's it from me. And thanks ever so much for watching. And go and buy the book.
Cheers, Neil. Thanks very much, mate. Thanks,
okay.
thanks everybody for tuning in.